Hello everyone, I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. The mansion loomed before me, a behemoth of stone and shadow against the fading twilight. As I fumbled with the keys, a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the crisp autumn air. I told myself it was just nerves. After all, it's not every day you get asked to house-sit a sprawling estate that looks like it jumped straight out of a Gothic novel. I pushed open the heavy oak door, wincing at the loud creak that echoed through the cavernous entryway. "Hello?" I called out, my voice small in the vastness. Silence answered me, broken only by the ticking of an antique grandfather clock. "Get it together, Sarah," I chided myself. "You're alone here, just like Mrs. Blackwood said you'd be. No need to jump at shadows." I lugged my suitcase up the grand staircase, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The bedroom Mrs. Blackwood had directed me to was larger than my entire apartment, with a four-poster bed that could easily sleep four. I unpacked quickly, eager to explore the rest of the house before it got too dark. Room after room revealed itself to me, each more opulent than the last. A library with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a music room with a grand piano gathering dust, a sunroom filled with exotic plants I couldn't name. It was like stepping into another world, one of old money and faded glamour. As night fell, I retreated to the kitchen to make dinner. The modern appliances stood out starkly against the vintage decor, a jarring reminder of the present day. I ate my pasta in silence, the scrape of my fork against the plate uncomfortably loud. That first night, I slept fitfully. The house creaked and groaned around me, settling in ways my city apartment never did. Every noise had me sitting bolt upright, heart racing before I remembered where I was. By the time dawn broke, I felt more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed. The next day passed uneventfully. I worked remotely from the library, the Wi-Fi surprisingly good for such an old house. As evening approached, I decided to run myself a bath in the clawfoot tub, hoping it would help me relax. I was just sinking into the steaming water when I heard it, a thud, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. My blood ran cold. I held my breath, straining to listen. There it was again, the slow, deliberate tread of someone trying to move quietly. "It's just the house settling," I told myself, "or your imagination running wild." But deep down, I knew better. With shaking hands, I got out of the tub and dressed quickly. I crept to the bathroom door and pressed my ear against it. The footsteps had stopped, but now I could hear something else, the sound of drawers opening and closing. Someone was in the house, searching for something. Panic clawed at my throat. My phone was in the bedroom. The landline was downstairs. I was trapped. Think. Oh, Sarah, think. I looked around the bathroom, desperate for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes fell on a heavy crystal soap dish. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Taking a deep breath, I eased the bathroom door open. The hallway was empty, but I could hear movement coming from one of the spare bedrooms. As quietly as I could, I crept towards the staircase. I had just reached the top of the staircase when a floorboard creaked beneath my foot. The noise from the bedroom stopped, abruptly. Heart pounding, I flew down the stairs, taking them two at a time. I could hear heavy footsteps behind me, giving chase. I ran for the front door, only to find it locked. In my panic, I couldn't remember which key was which. A hand grabbed my shoulder, spinning me around. I lashed out blindly with the soap dish, feeling it connect with something solid. There was a grunt of pain, and the grip on my shoulder loosened. I didn't wait to see who my attacker was. I ran for the kitchen, thinking of the back door. Behind me, I could hear the intruder recovering, their footsteps pounding after me. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the microwave clock. I stumbled through it, hands outstretched, searching for the door. My hips slammed into the kitchen island, and I bit back a cry of pain. Where was the damn door? My fingers brushed against cool glass. The door. I fumbled for the handle, my sweaty hands slipping on the smooth metal. Got it. I yanked the door open and burst out into the cool night air. The vast, manicured lawn stretched out before me, the trees at its edge, a dark, forbidding wall. I ran towards them, the damp grass soaking through my socks. I had just reached the tree line when I heard the back door clam open. "Stop!" a deep voice bellowed. The sound spurred me on, pushing me deeper into the woods. Branches whipped at my face as I ran, roots threatening to trip me with every step. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond get away, get help. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. My lungs burned and my legs felt like they were on fire. But fear kept me going, the certainty that if I stopped, something terrible would happen. Finally, when I felt I couldn't take another step, I saw lights through the trees. A house. I stumbled towards it, relief making me dizzy. As I broke through the tree line, I realized, with a start, that I recognized this house. It was the mansion. Somehow, in my blind panic, I had run in a circle. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then I saw a car in the driveway that hadn't been there before. A police car. Safety. I ran towards it, waving my arms. "Help!" I screamed. "Oh, please help!" The front door of the mansion opened, and a police officer stepped out, followed by Mrs. Blackwood. "Oh, thank God," Mrs. Blackwood said, rushing towards me. "Sarah, dear, are you all right? We've been so worried." I stared at her, uncomprehending. "There's someone in the house," I gasped. "An intruder. He chased me." Mrs. Blackwood and the officer exchanged a look. "Sarah," Mrs. Blackwood said gently, "there's no intruder. It's just Harold." Harold, as if summoned by his name. A man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and lean, with graying hair and a kindly face. There was a bruise forming on his cheek. "I'm so sorry for frightening you," he said, his voice deep and apologetic, the same voice that had shouted after me in the woods. I should have announced myself. "Sarah, this is my husband, Harold," Mrs. Blackwood explained. "He wasn't supposed to be back until next week, but his business trip ended early. He came home to surprise me, not realizing I had asked you to house sit. The adrenaline that had been keeping me going suddenly evaporated, leaving me elated, but the noises, the searching. Harold looked sheepish. I was looking for my reading glasses. I didn't want to wake you up, so I was trying to be quiet. When I heard you run, I tried to explain, but he gestured to his bruised cheek. You have quite an arm." I felt my face burn with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," I stammered. I thought—" No. It's my fault entirely," Harold insisted. "I should have called ahead, or at least turned on some lights." Mrs. Blackwood put an arm around my shoulders. "Come inside, dear. You're shaking like a leaf. Let's get you warmed up, and we'll sort all this out." As we walked back to the house, the police officer following behind, I couldn't help but laugh. All that terror, all that running, and it had been a simple misunderstanding. But later that night, as I lay in bed listening to the Blackwoods move about the house, a small part of me wondered, what if it hadn't been Harold? What if it had been a real intruder? I pulled the covers up higher, suddenly aware of just how big and empty the mansion was, and how many places there were for someone or something to hide. Sleep was a long time coming that night. The first rays of sunlight had just begun to pierce through the dense canopy when I realized I was hopelessly lost. What was supposed to be a rejuvenating solo hike through the Cascade Mountains had turned into a nightmare, and I was about to stumble into something far worse than I could have imagined. I've always prided myself on my outdoorsman skills. Growing up in the Pacific Northwest, I spent more time in the woods than I did in my own backyard. But as I stood there, my worn hiking boots sinking slightly into the damp earth, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the crisp mountain air. The trail I had been following for the past 2 days had gradually become less defined until it disappeared altogether. I'd pushed on, confident in my ability to navigate by the sun and my trusty compass, but now surrounded by towering pines and jagged rocks, everything looked the same. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the panic rising in my chest. "Stay calm, Jake," I muttered to myself. "Panic is the enemy." I decided to climb to higher ground, hoping to spot a landmark or maybe even catch a glimpse of the highway in the distance. The climb was steep, and my muscles protested with every step. I was rationing my water, unsure of when I'd find a stream to refill my bottles. As I neared the top of the ridge, I heard something that made me freeze mid-step. Voices. Human voices. Relief washed over me. Other hikers. Maybe they could help me get my bearings. I quickened my pace, ignoring the burning in my thighs. But as I got closer, the voices became clearer, and my relief turned to unease. These weren't the cheerful tones of fellow hikers enjoying nature. The voices were low, angry, and punctuated by the occasional sound of metal clanging against metal. I slowed down, moving as quietly as I could. Years of hunting with my dad had taught me how to move through the forest without making a sound. I crouched behind a large boulder, peering around it cautiously. What I saw made my blood run cold. In a small clearing, about 50 yards away, I could see 3 men. They were rough-looking, with unkempt beards and dirty clothes, but it wasn't their appearance that sent a jolt of fear through me. It was what they were doing. The men were gathered around what looked like a makeshift lab. Plastic containers, tubing, and propane tanks were scattered around. One of the men was carefully measuring out a white powder, while another stirred a bubbling pot over a portable stove. I didn't need to be a chemist to know what I was looking at. This was a meth lab, hidden deep in the wilderness, where no one was likely to stumble upon it, except I had. I held my breath, not daring to move a muscle. These men were dangerous, that much was clear. If they caught me, I doubted they'd simply let me go on my way. "Damn it, Tony!" one of the men suddenly shouted, making me flinch. "I told you to watch the temperature, you're gonna ruin the whole batch!" "Screw you, Mike!" the man stirring the pot shot back. "I know what I'm doing!" "Both of you, shut up!" the third man growled. He seemed to be the leader. "We don't need any noise carrying. Last thing we need is some rangers stumbling on us." If only they knew how close they were to the truth. I knew I needed to get out of there, and fast. But which way? I was lost to begin with, and now I had to factor in avoiding these criminals. One wrong move, one snapped twig, and I could be discovered. Slowly, carefully, I began to back away from my hiding spot. My heart was pounding so loudly, I was sure they must be able to hear it. Crack! The sound of a branch breaking under my foot was like a gunshot in the quiet forest. I froze, my whole body tensing. "What was that?" one of the men said sharply. "Probably just a deer," another replied, but he didn't sound convinced. "Check it out," the leader commanded. "Could be a bear attracted by the smell." I heard footsteps coming in my direction. Panic overtook me, and I ran. I no longer cared about being quiet. All that mattered was putting as much distance between myself and those men as possible. Behind me, I heard shouts of alarm. They had spotted me. I ran like I'd never run before, crashing through underbrush, leaping over fallen logs. Branches whipped at my face, leaving stinging cuts, but I didn't slow down. I could hear them pursuing me.
their heavy footfalls and angry shouts spurring me on. I had no idea where I was going. My only thought was to keep moving, to not let them catch me. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they were on fire, but fear kept me going. Suddenly, the ground disappeared from under my feet. I had run right off the edge of a steep incline. I tumbled down the slope, my world becoming a dizzying blur of earth and sky. I came to a stop at the bottom, the breath knocked out of me. For a moment, I lay there, dazed and gasping for air. Then I heard the voices again, closer now. Ignoring the pain radiating through my body, I forced myself to my feet and started running again. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees becoming a green blur as I ran. I had no idea how long I'd been running, or how far I'd gone. My throat was raw, my mouth dry as dust, but still I pushed on. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I burst out of the tree line and onto a road. An actual paved road. I could have cried with relief, but I wasn't safe yet. I could still hear shouts in the distance. They were still after me. I looked up and down the road, praying to see a car aim, a truck, anything, but it was deserted. Left with no other choice, I started running down the road. It had to lead somewhere, right? To civilization, to safety. I don't know how long I ran along that road. Time seemed to lose all meaning. My whole world narrowed down to the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the asphalt and the burning in my lungs. And then, like a mirage in the desert, I saw it. A gas station. Never in my life had I been so happy to see one of those garish neon signs. I staggered into the parking lot, startling an old man filling up his pickup truck. "Please," I gasped out, my voice hoarse. I need help. Call the police." The man took one look at me, wild-eyed, covered in cuts and bruises, gasping for breath, and hurried into the store. Moments later, he came back out with the clerk, who was already on the phone with 911. As I sank to the ground, my legs finally giving out, I heard the clerk describing my condition to the dispatcher. The old man draped his jacket over my shoulders, murmuring words of comfort. It wasn't until I heard the wail of approaching sirens that I finally allowed myself to relax. I was safe. I had made it. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and medical checks. I told the authorities everything I had seen, and they assured me they would investigate. They found the lab abandoned, but with clear evidence of recent activity. The men, however, had vanished into the vast wilderness. It took me a long time to feel comfortable in the woods again after that. The forest, once my sanctuary, had become a place of terror, but slowly I found my way back. I still hike, still seek out the solitude of nature, but now I'm always aware that even in the most remote places, you're never truly alone, and sometimes that's not a comforting thought at all. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an eerie glow over the empty corridors as I made my rounds. It was just another quiet night at Westfield Mall, or so I thought. Little did I know that in a matter of hours I'd be fighting for my life against an unseen enemy in a place I once considered mundane. My name's Mike, and I've been the night security guard at Westfield for the past 3 years. It's usually a boring job. Walk around, check the locks, make sure no one's trying to camp out in the food court overnight. But that night was different. It started like any other shift. I arrived at 10 p.m., just as the last of the cleaning crew was leaving. I nodded to Janice, the elderly woman who always stayed late to make sure the floors were spotless. "All quiet tonight, Mike?" she said with a smile. "See you tomorrow." If only she knew. I settled into the security office, a small room filled with monitors showing feeds from the mall's numerous cameras. I get a quick scan. Nothing but empty doors and darkened corridors. Perfect. Around midnight, I started my first round of the night. The mall was eerily silent, my footsteps echoing off the tiled floors. I'd never tell anyone, but these walks always gave me the creeps. Something about the mannequins in the store windows, their blank faces seeming to follow me as I passed. I was on the second floor, passing by the large fountain in the center atrium, when I heard it. A faint noise, like metal scraping against metal. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the empty space. No response. I pulled out my flashlight, sweeping its beam across the darkened stores. Nothing seemed out of place. "Must be the old pipes," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. I continued my round, but now I was on high alert. Every shadow seemed deeper, every noise amplified by the time I made it back to the security office. My nerves were frayed. I sank into my chair, eyes scanning the monitors. Everything looked normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. That's when I saw it. A shadow, moving quickly across one of the screens. I leaned in, heart racing. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, leaving me wondering if I had imagined it. I rewound the footage, watching carefully. There, in the corner of the screen, a figure darted past, too fast to make out clearly. My mouth dried. Someone was in the mall. I grabbed my radio, ready to call for backup, but hesitated. What if I was overreacting? I didn't want to be the guard who called the cops over a trick of the light. I decided to investigate myself first, armed with my flashlight and a heavy wrench I kept in the office for emergencies. I ventured out into the mall. The corridors seemed different now, menacing. Every storefront could be hiding an intruder, every shadow concealing a threat. I moved cautiously, ears straining for any sound, out of place.
Realized whoever they were enjoying this game of cat and mouse. Suddenly, the lights in the store flickered on. I blinked, momentarily blinded. When my vision cleared, I saw them. 3 men, dressed all in black, wearing masks that covered their faces. They were spread out, blocking my exit. One of them held a crowbar, another a knife. "Well, well," the one in the middle said, his voice muffled by the mask. "Looks like we've got company, boys." I raised my wrench, trying to look more confident than I felt. "You're trespassing," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Leave now, and I won't call the cops." They laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the store. "I don't think you understand the situation, Rant," the leader said. "We're not going anywhere, and neither are you." They started to advance, spreading out to surround me. I backed up, mind racing. I was outnumbered and outarmed. I needed a plan, fast. My back hit a display stand, and an idea struck. I grabbed the laptop off the stand and hurled it at the nearest intruder. He ducked, and in that moment of distraction, I ran. I darted between the aisles, knocking over displays as I went to slow them down. I could hear them cursing, giving chase. I reached the security gate and slid under it. Not stopping to catch my breath, I ran through the mall, the sound of pursuit close behind. I needed to get to the security office, to call for help, but they were between me and the office. I took a sharp turn heading for the service corridors. If I could lose them in the maze of back hallways, I might have a chance. The service door slammed behind me as I entered the narrow corridor. It was darker here, the emergency lights casting long shadows. I ran, taking random turns, hoping to throw off my pursuers. Left, right, another right. I was quickly lost in the warren of corridors. But I could still hear them, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. I found myself in the mall's basement, surrounded by hulking machinery. Generators, HVAC systems, water heaters. The noise was deafening, masking any sounds of pursuit. I crouched behind a large boiler, trying to catch my breath and think. I needed to get to a phone, to call for help, but my radio was back in the security office. Even my cell phone was in my locker. I was on my own. A noise to my left made me freeze. One of them was close, searching methodically. I could see his flashlight beam sweeping across the floor. I held my breath as the light moved inches from my feet. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought he'd seen me, but the light moved on. I waited until I could no longer hear him, then started to move.
I needed to get back upstairs to find a way out. I crept through the basement, every nerve on high alert. I'd almost made it to the stairs when a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun, swinging my wrench blindly. It connected with something solid, and I heard a grunt of pain. I didn't wait to see who I'd hit. I ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I burst back into the main mall. I could hear shouts behind me. They were all after me now. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my lungs burning, legs pumping. I rounded a corner and saw it. The exit. Freedom. I slammed into the door at full speed, already imagining the cool night air on my face. But the door didn't budge. It was locked. Of course it was locked. I had locked it myself at the start of my shift. Panic threatened to overwhelm me as I fumbled for my keys. Behind me, I could hear them getting closer. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get the key in the lock. Turn. Damn you, turn! Just as I heard them around the corner, the lock clicked. I yanked the door open and burst out into the night. I ran across the parking lot, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached the 24-hour diner across the street. I burst in, startling the lone waitress. "Call the police," I gasped. "Please." The next few hours were a blur of police statements and questions. They searched them all but found no sign of the intruders, just some broken displays in the electronics store and a crowbar left behind. I quit my job the next day. I couldn't face going back into that mall, couldn't shake the feeling of being hunted. Sometimes late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of footsteps in my ears, and I wonder, what if I hadn't made it to that door in time? The crackling of our campfire did little to mask the eerie silence that had fallen over the forest. What had started as a peaceful getaway from me and Sarah had turned into a nightmare. As I stared into the darkness beyond our small circle of light, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Little did I know, our idyllic camping trip was about to become a desperate fight for survival. My name's Alex, and I've always loved the great outdoors. When I suggested to my girlfriend Sarah that we take a weekend camping trip to celebrate our anniversary, she was all for it. We picked a spot deep in the Ozarks, far from the usual tourist trails. We wanted solitude, a chance to reconnect with nature and each other. Be careful what you wish for, I guess. The first day was perfect. We hiked through lush forests, the canopy above us alive with birdsong. We set up our tent in a small clearing near a bubbling stream, the sound of the water a soothing backdrop to our quiet conversation. As night fell, we sat by our campfire, roasting marshmallows and pointing out constellations in the clear sky above. It was on the second day that things started to feel off. We were exploring a nearby ridge when Sarah stopped suddenly. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice tight with tension. I listened, but heard nothing beyond the usual forest sounds. "Hear what? I thought I heard voices," she said, her eyes scanning the trees around us. "Like someone shouting?" I strained my ears, but still heard nothing unusual. "Probably just other hikers," I said, trying to sound reassuring. But a small knot of unease had formed in my stomach. We continued our hike, but the carefree mood of earlier had evaporated. I found myself jumping at every snapping twig, every rustle in the underbrush. Sarah kept close to me, her earlier enthusiasm replaced with nervous glances over her shoulder. As we made our way back to our campsite, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Every time I turned to look behind us, I saw nothing but trees and shadows, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each step. We reached our clearing just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. But even the beautiful sunset couldn't dispel the unease that had settled over us. "Maybe we should pack up and head back," Sarah suggested, as we prepared dinner. "I've got a bad feeling about this place." I was tempted to agree, but my pride got in the way. "Let's stick it out one more night," I said. "It's probably just our imaginations. We're come out here for an adventure, right?" Sarah nodded, but I could see she wasn't convinced. Neither was I, if I'm being honest. As darkness fell, we huddled close to our campfire, the flames casting flickering shadows on the surrounding trees. We spoke in hushed tones, as if afraid of being overheard. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the leaves had us on edge. It was just after midnight when we heard it. A long, low whistle, followed by an answering call from the other side of our clearing. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "There's someone out there."
Risk, sweetheart. No, I'm afraid you'll be staying with us for a while. The other men started to move closer, forming a tight circle around us. I looked around desperately for a way out, but we were completely surrounded. That's when I saw it. A flash of metal in the firelight. One of the men had pulled out a length of rope. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I grabbed a burning log from the fire and hurled it at the nearest man. He yelled in pain and surprise as embers scattered across his chest. "Run!" I shouted at Sarah, pushing her towards the darkest part of the forest. We took off, crashing through the underbrush. Behind us, I could hear shouts of anger and the sound of pursuit. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. We ran blindly through the dark forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. I had no idea where we were going, only that we needed to put as much distance between us and those men as possible. Sarah stumbled and I caught her before she could fall. "Keep going," I gasped, pulling her along. "We can't stop." The sound of our pursuers seemed to be getting closer. They knew these woods better than we did, and they were gaining on us. Just when I thought we couldn't run any further, we burst out of the tree line and found ourselves at the edge of a steep ravine. The stream we had camped near had carved a deep gully into the earth, the water now a rushing torrent far below us. "What do we do?" Sarah cried, her eyes wild with fear. I looked back at the forest, saw flashlight beams dancing between the trees. They were almost upon us. "We have to jump," I said, gesturing to the other side of the ravine. It wasn't too wide, maybe 10 feet across. We could make it. We had to make it. Sarah looked at me like I was crazy, but the sound of voices growing nearer made up her mind. She nodded. "On 3, I said, gripping her hand tightly. 1, 2, 3. We leapt together, the ground disappearing beneath our feet. For a heart-stopping moment, we were suspended in the air. The roar of the water below us, drowning out everything else. Then we hit the other side, rolling to break our fall. Pain shot through my ankle, but adrenaline kept me moving. I pulled Sarah to her feet, and we staggered into the cover of the trees on this side of the ravine. Behind us, I heard shouts of frustration. They had reached the ravine, but it had bought us precious time. We kept moving, pushing our exhausted bodies to their limits. The rest of the night passed in a blur of fear and desperate flight. Every sound had us freezing in terror, certain we were about to be discovered. As the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees, we finally heard what we had been praying for. The distant sound of traffic. We had reached a road. Stumbling out of the forest, we flagged down the first car we saw, an old pickup truck driven by an elderly farmer. The look on his face when he saw us, dirty, bleeding, wild-eyed with fear, must have been something to behold. We babbled out our story as he drove us to the nearest police station. The authorities took our statement and sent out search parties, but they never found any trace of the men or their operation. Maybe they had cleared out, knowing we would bring the law down on them. It took a long time for the nightmares to stop, for us to feel safe again. Sarah and I are still together, stronger for having survived that night, but we don't go camping anymore. Some scars run too deep. Some fears are too primal to ever fully shake off. Sometimes when I'm lying awake at night, I can still hear those whistles echoing through the trees, still feel the terror of being hunted, And I wonder about those dark forests, about what other secrets they might be hiding, waiting to be stumbled upon by unsuspecting campers looking for a peaceful getaway. The highway stretched endlessly before me, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the night. I'd been driving for hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional flicker of my truck's headlights catching a road sign or a startled animal's eyes. I never expected that picking up a stranger would turn my routine haul into a nightmare. But that's exactly what happened on that moonless night in the middle of nowhere. My name's Jack, and I've been a long-haul trucker for the better part of 2 decades. I've seen my fair share of weird stuff on the road, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened that night. It was just past midnight, and I was hauling a load of electronics from Chicago to Phoenix. The radio was playing softly, some late-night talk show about alien abductions. I chuckled to myself, thinking how some people would believe anything to make their lives more exciting. That's when I saw him. A lone figure on the side of the road, thumb out, hoping for a ride. Now, I'm not usually one for picking up hitchhikers, too many horror stories, too many risks, but something about this guy made me slow down. Maybe it was the late hour, or the fact that we were miles from anywhere, or maybe I was just tired of my own company. I pulled over, the air brakes hissing as the truck came to a stop. The man jogged up to the passenger side, and I leaned over to open the door. "Where are you headed?" I asked as he climbed in. "West," he said simply. "As far as you're going." I gave him a once-over as he settled into the seat. He was younger than me, probably in his early 30s, lean, with close-cropped hair and intense eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He had a small duffel bag that he kept clutching tightly on his lap. "I'm Jack," I said, pulling back onto the highway. "Mike," he replied, not offering a hand to shake. We drove in silence for a while, the only sound the rumble of the engine and the whisper of tires on asphalt. I tried to make conversation, ask him where he was from, what he did for a living, but Mike's answers were short, evasive. After a while, I gave up and focused on the road. It was about an hour later that I first noticed something was off. Mike had been fidgeting in his seat, constantly checking the side mirrors. At first, I thought maybe he was just nervous about hitching a ride with a stranger, but then I caught him glancing at me, a calculating look in his eyes that sent a chill down my spine. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Fine," he said, quickly, too quickly. "Just not used to being in a truck this big." I nodded, but I didn't believe him. My instincts, honed by years on the road, were screaming that something was wrong. We were passing through a particularly desolate stretch of highway when Mike suddenly spoke up. "Pull over," he said, his voice tight. "What?" I said. "Pull over. Now." I glanced at him and felt my blood run cold. Mike had a gun in his hand, pointed straight at me. My mind raced. Was this a robbery? Was he going to kill me and take the truck? I thought about my wife back home, about our kids. Would I ever see them again? "Look, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If you want money, I've got some cash in my wallet. Just take it and go. No need for this to get ugly." Mike laughed, a harsh, humorless howl. "This isn't about money, Jack. This is about survival. Now pull over before I decide to redecorate your cab with your brains." I did as he said, guiding the massive truck onto the shoulder. As soon as we came to a stop, Mike was in motion. He reached across me and grabbed the keys from the ignition. "Get out," he ordered, gesturing with the gun. I climbed out of the cab, my legs feeling like jelly. Mike followed, keeping the gun trained on me. "What do you want?" I asked, hating how my voice shook. "I need your truck," Mike said, "and I need you to drive it." "Drive it where?" "You'll know when we get there. Now get back in. You're driving." As I climbed back into the driver's seat, my mind was working overtime. I needed to find a way out of this situation. Maybe if I could distract him, I could make a grab for the gun, or maybe I could intentionally drive badly, try to attract the attention of a highway patrol car. But, as if reading my thoughts, Mike spoke up. "Don't try anything stupid, Jack. I've got nothing to lose, which means you've got everything to lose. Just drive normally and do what I say." So I drove. Hours passed, the landscape outside changing as we headed west. All the while, Mike kept the gun trained on me, his eyes constantly scanning the road behind us. "Who are you running from?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. Mike was quiet for so long. I thought he wasn't going to answer. Then, "Bad people," he said softly. "People who want me dead." "Why?" He laughed again, that same humorless howl. "Because I know things. Things they don't want anyone to know."
Some kind of whistleblower, a witness to a crime. Whatever it was, I was now involved, whether I wanted to be or not. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Mike suddenly tensed. "Shit," he muttered, staring intently at the side mirror. I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a black SUV gaining on us fast. "Drive faster," Mike ordered, his knuckles white around the gun. I pressed down on the accelerator, the engine roaring as we picked up speed. But the SUV was faster, sleeker. It pulled alongside us, and I saw the passenger window roll down. "Get down!" Mike yelled just as the sound of gunfire erupted. I ducked instinctively, feeling the truck swerve as bullets pinged off the metal. Mike was returning fire, leaning out the window to shoot at our pursuers. The next few minutes were chaos. I struggled to keep the truck on the road while trying to stay low. The sound of gunfire was deafening in the confined space of the cab. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the truck lurched violently. They had shot out one of our tires. I fought with the steering wheel, trying to keep us from jackknifing. "There!" Mike shouted, pointing ahead. "Pull into that rest stop!" I saw the sign for the upcoming rest area and made for it, the truck swaying dangerously on its blown tire. We skidded into the parking lot, coming to a stop in a cloud of dust and burning rubber. "Run!" Mike yelled, already jumping out of the cab. I didn't need to be told twice. I was out of the truck and running before I even had time to think. I could hear car doors slamming behind us, shouts of anger. Mike and I ran towards the small cluster of buildings that made up the rest stop. It was early and the place was deserted. We burst into the main building, startling a sleepy-looking attendant. "Call the police!" I gasped out. "Are there men with guns?" But before I could finish, the door burst open again. 3 men entered, all holding weapons. The attendant screamed and ducked behind the counter. Mike shoved me behind a rack of snacks and opened fire. The men returned fire, and suddenly the quiet rest stop was transformed into a war zone. Chips bags exploded, sending a rain of potato shards everywhere. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. I cowered behind the rack, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. This was insane. How had my normal night turned into this? The gunfight seemed to last forever, but it was probably only a few minutes. Then suddenly, silence fell. I peered around the edge of the rack. Mike was still standing, his gun still raised. The 3 men were on the ground, not moving. I felt bile rise in my throat and had to swallow hard to keep from throwing up in the rest stop. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Someone, probably the attendant, had managed to call the police. Mike turned to me, his face grim. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Before I could respond, he was gone, running out the back door of the rest stop. I thought about following him, but my legs wouldn't move. I just sat there, surrounded by the debris of the gunfight, waiting for the police to arrive. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and questions. I told them everything, about picking up Mike, about the chase and the shootout.
They seemed skeptical at first, but the evidence backed up my story. It turned out Mike was indeed a whistleblower, set to testify against a powerful crime syndicate. The men chasing us were hitmen, sent to silence him. Mike was never found, having vanished into the desert. As for me, I was cleared of any wrongdoing, but the experience changed me. I still drive my routes, still haul my loads across the country, but I'm more cautious now, more aware of the darkness that can lurk behind a friendly face, and I never, ever pick up hitchhikers anymore. The first sign of trouble was the sputtering of my car's engine, a sound that sent a chill down my spine on that desolate stretch of highway. As the vehicle lurched to a stop, I had no idea that this breakdown would be the beginning of a nightmarish encounter that would test my will to survive. Sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't the ones in our imagination, but the ones masquerading as good Samaritans. My name is Emily, and I've always prided myself on being independent and resourceful. But on that fateful night, those qualities would be pushed to their limits. I was on my way back from a job interview in the next state over. It was a long drive, but I was riding the high of what I felt was a successful meeting. The sun had set hours ago, and the highway had thinned out to just the occasional truck. I was tired, but determined to make it home. That's when my trusty old sedan decided it had had enough. The engine made a horrible grinding noise, and despite my pleading and cajoling, the car rolled to a stop on the shoulder of the road. "No, no, no," I muttered, turning the key in the ignition repeatedly. Nothing, not even a sputter. I sat there for a moment, trying to calm my racing heart. I was in the middle of nowhere, my cell phone showing no bars of service. The moonless night seemed to press in on all sides, the darkness beyond my headlights absolute. Taking a deep breath, I popped the hood and got out of the car. I didn't know much about engines, but I hoped it might be something simple, something I could fix. As soon as I lifted the hood, I knew it was hopeless. The engine was a maze of pipes and wires that meant nothing to me. I was just about to close the hood when I saw headlights approaching in the distance. Relief washed over me. Maybe they would stop and help, or at least let me use their phone. The vehicle, an old pickup truck, slowed as it neared me. It pulled over, and a man got out. In the glow of my headlights, I could see that he was middle-aged, with a weathered face and calloused hands. He wore worn jeans and a flannel shirt, looking every bit the part of a local farmer or rancher. "Guard trouble?" he called out, walking towards me. "Yeah," I replied, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. It just died on me. "I don't suppose you know anything about engines?" He chuckled. "I might know a thing or two. Mind if I take a look?" I stepped aside, allowing him to peer into the engine compartment. He poked around for a few minutes, making thoughtful noises. "Well, looks like your timing belt's shot," he finally said. "Not something we can fix out here, I'm afraid." My heart sank. "I don't suppose you have a cell phone I could borrow? Mine's not getting any service out here." He shook his head. "Sorry, don't believe in those things. But tell you what, I can give you a ride to the nearest town. There's a mechanic there who could help you out." I hesitated. Every instinct was screaming at me not to get into a car with a stranger, especially out here in the middle of nowhere. But what choice did I have? I couldn't stay here all night, and who knew when another car might come? "That would be great. Thank you," I heard myself say. He smiled, but something about it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Happy to help. Name's Tom, by the way." "Emily," I replied, grabbing my purse from my car. As we drove, Tom kept up a steady stream of small talk. He asked about where I was from, where I was headed. I answered vaguely, not wanting to give away too much information. Something about him was making me increasingly uneasy, though. I couldn't put my finger on why. We had been driving for about 20 minutes when I realized something was wrong. We should have reached a town by now,
or at least seen some signs of civilization, but there was nothing but darkness outside the windows. How much further is it to town?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Tom glanced at me, and this time there was no mistaking the coldness in his eyes. "Oh, we're not going to town, Emily." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean? Where are we going?" He didn't answer, just pressed down harder on the accelerator. The truck picked up speed, eating up the empty road ahead. Panic surged through me. I reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. Child locks, I realized with horror. "Please," I said, my voice shaking, "just let me out. I won't tell anyone, I swear." Tom laughed, a harsh sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, you know you won't tell anyone. No one ever does." The implication of his words hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't the first time he had done this. How many other stranded motorists had he picked up, promising help, only to... I couldn't even finish the thought. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out. I could try to grab the wheel, force us off the road, but at this speed, that would likely kill us both. I could try to reason with him, appeal to his humanity, but the cold gleam in his eyes told me that was a lost cause. As we sped through the night, Tom started talking again, but this time his words chilled me to the bone. "You know, Emily, you really shouldn't trust strangers," he said, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Bad things happen to girls who aren't careful. But don't worry, it'll all be over soon." I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Suddenly, an idea struck me. It was risky.
Actually fatal, but it was the only chance I had. I started coughing violently, doubling over in my seat. "What the hell?" Tom said, glancing over at me. I continued coughing, making choking noises. "Can't breathe," I gasped out. Tom looked uncertain for the first time. "Hey, cut that out," he said. But I could hear a note of concern in his voice. I slumped in my seat, my coughs turning to wheezes. I closed my eyes, letting my body go limp. "Shit," Tom muttered. The truck began to slow down. I felt the vehicle pull over to the side of the road. Tom put it in park and leaned over me. "Hey, wake up," he said, shaking my shoulder roughly. This was my chance. My eyes snapped open and I drove my elbow into his face with all the strength I could muster. I felt his nose crunch under the impact and he reeled back with a howl of pain. In his moment of distraction, I lunged for the keys in the ignition. I yanked them out and scrambled for the door, my fingers scrabbling at the lock. Tom recovered quickly, grabbing for me. His fingers tangled in my hair, yanking me back. I screamed, more in rage than fear, and twisted in his grip. My free hand found his eyes and I dug my fingers in without mercy. He let go with a scream of agony and I tumbled out of the truck onto the hard ground. Pain shot through my body, but adrenaline kept me moving. I staggered to my feet and ran. I could hear Tom behind me, cursing and stumbling in the darkness. But I had the advantage now. My eyes had adjusted to the darkness and I was younger, faster. I ran like I had never run before. My lungs burning, my legs pumping. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to get away. The keys were still clutched in my hand, cutting into my palm. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Eventually, I couldn't hear Tom anymore, but I didn't slow down. The night was alive with noises. The rustle of wind through grass, the hoot of an owl, the scurrying of small animals. But to my terrified mind, every sound was Tom coming to finish what he had started. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I saw it. Lights in the distance, a town or at least a gas station, civilization, safety. With a final burst of energy I didn't know I possessed, I sprinted towards the lights. As I got closer, I could make out the shape of a small gas station, a lone beacon in the darkness. I burst into the fluorescent-lit store, startling the sleepy-looking clerk behind the counter. "Please," I gasped out, "call the police. There's a man. He tried to..." I couldn't finish the sentence.
The adrenaline that had kept me going suddenly drained away, leaving me shaky and weak. My legs gave out and I sank to the floor, the events of the night finally catching up to me. The clerk, to his credit, didn't hesitate. He grabbed the phone and dialed 911 while keeping a wary eye on the door. The police arrived quickly, their flashing lights a welcome sight. I told them everything, describing Tom and his truck in as much detail as I could remember. They found him a few hours later, trying to fix his truck on the side of the road. The keys I had taken were the only copy he had. In his truck, they found evidence linking him to several unsolved disappearances in the area. As for me, I was lucky. Apart from some cuts and bruises, I was physically unharmed. The mental scars took longer to heal. For months after, I couldn't drive at night without breaking into a cold sweat. Every passing truck on the highway made my heart race, but I survived. I outsmarted a predator and lived to tell the tale. And if my story can serve as a warning to others to trust their instincts and be cautious, then maybe some good can come from that terrifying night. I still drive that stretch of highway sometimes, and every time I pass the spot where my car broke down, I say a silent thank you to whatever force was looking out for me that night, and to the strength I found within myself when I needed it most. The crumbling facade of the abandoned BlACK factory loomed before us, its broken windows staring down like hollow eyes. We were just a group of friends looking for a thrill, urban explorers seeking the perfect spot for some cool photos. Little did we know we were about to stumble into a nightmare that would test our will to survive and change us forever. My name's Jake, and I've always been fascinated by abandoned places. There's something haunting yet beautiful about a building left to decay, nature slowly reclaiming what man has discarded. So when my friends and I heard about the old BlACK factory on the outskirts of town, we knew we had to check it out. There were 5 of us that day. Me, my best friend Tom, his girlfriend Sarah, and our friends Mike and Lizzie. We'd done this kind of thing before, but never in a place quite this big or isolated. As we approached the factory, I felt a familiar mix of excitement and apprehension. The chain-link fence surrounding the property was rusted and bent, easy enough to slip through. We made our way across the overgrown parking lot, our footsteps crunching on broken glass and gravel. "This place is creepy as hell," Lizzie whispered, her camera already out and snapping pictures. "That's the point, isn't it?" Mike grinned, but I could see he was a bit on edge, too. We found a side door that was hanging off its hinges and slipped inside. The interior was dark and musty, years of dust and decay filling our nostrils. Beams of sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating dancing motes of dust. "Let's split up," Tom suggested. "We'll cover more ground that way." I wasn't too keen on the idea, but everyone else seemed excited about it. We agreed to meet back at the entrance in an hour and set off in different directions. I made my way deeper into the factory, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The place was a maze of rusted machinery and collapsed shelving. Every step echoed ominously, and more than once, I spooked myself with my own reflection in a grimy window. I was in what looked like an old office area when I heard it, a shuffle of movement too heavy to be a rat or other small animal. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. "Guys?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vast space. No answer. I turned slowly, sweeping my flashlight around the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That's when I saw it. A shadow moving quickly past a doorway at the end of the hall. It was too big to be any of my friends. Fear gripped me, but curiosity won out. I moved towards the doorway, every nerve on high alert. As I reached the threshold, I heard voices. Low, rough whispers that definitely didn't belong to any of my friends. I peered around the corner, and my blood ran cold. In what must have been the factory's main floor, I saw 3 men. They were gathered around a collection of crates, passing packages between them. Even from a distance, I knew what I was seeing. This was a drug deal. I must have made a noise, a gasp or a shifting of my feet, because suddenly, one of the men looked up. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then all hell broke loose. "Hey!" the man shouted, reaching for something at his waist. I didn't wait to see what it was. I turned and ran. I could hear shouts and footsteps behind me as I tore through the factory. My mind was racing. I knew I needed to find my friends, to warn them. We needed to get out of here now. I rounded a corner and slammed right into Tom. We both went down in a tangle of limbs. "Jake, what the hell, man?" Tom groaned, rubbing his head. "No time," I gasped, scrambling to my feet. "We need to go, now. Where are the others?" The urgency in my voice must have gotten to him because he didn't ask any more questions. "Sarah's just down there," he pointed. "I don't know where Mike and Lizzie went." We found Sarah quickly, and I gave them a rushed explanation as we moved. Their eyes widened in fear as they realized the danger we were in. "We need to find Mike and Lizzie," Sarah said, her voice shaking. I nodded, but before we could decide on a plan, we heard a scream. It was Lizzie. We ran towards the sound, caution forgotten in our desperation to reach our friend. We burst into a large room and saw Lizzie backed into a corner, one of the men advancing on her. Mike was on the ground, not moving. Without thinking, I grabbed a piece of rusted pipe from the ground and charged. I caught the man by surprise, swinging the pipe and connecting with his shoulder. He went down with a yell of pain. "Run!" I shouted to Lizzie. She didn't need to be told twice. Tom was checking on Mike. "He's breathing," he reported. "I think he's just knocked out." The man I had hit was getting to his feet, murder in his eyes. Behind him I could see his two other men.
His companions entering the room. "You kids picked the wrong place to play, Explorer," one of them growled. We were trapped. The only exit was behind the men, and they were blocking our path. My mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare. That's when I saw it. A conveyor belt leading up to a higher level. If we could get up there, maybe we could find another way out. "The belt," I hissed to Tom. "We need to get up there." He nodded, understanding immediately. "On 3, he whispered. 1, 2, 3. We moved as one. Tom and I grabbed Mike under the arms and ran for the conveyor belt. Sarah and Lizzie were right behind us. The men, caught off guard by our sudden movement, took a second to react, but that second was all we needed. We scrambled up the rusted conveyor belt, the sharp edges cutting into our hands. I could hear the men shouting, their footsteps pounding as they gave chase. We reached the upper level and found ourselves in a maze of catwalks and suspended walkways. The factory stretched out below us, a labyrinth of shadows and rusted metal. "Which way?" Sarah panted. I looked around frantically. "There!" I pointed to a door on the far side of the room. It was marked with a faded exit sign. We ran across the catwalks, the whole structure shaking under our feet. Behind us, I could hear the men climbing up after us. We reached the door, and I yanked it open, revealing a rusted fire escape. Without hesitation, we started down. We were about halfway down when I heard a gunshot. The sound echoed through the factory, making us all flinch. "Keep moving!" I shouted. We practically fell down the last few flights, our feet clanging on the metal steps. As soon as we hit the ground, we ran. We didn't stop running until we reached Tom's car parked a few blocks away. We piled in, Mike still groggy but conscious now, and Tom peeled out of there like the devil himself was chasing us. It wasn't until we were miles away, the factory long out of sight, that we finally allowed ourselves to breathe. What just happened?" Lizzie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I told them everything I had seen, about the drug deal and the chase. As I spoke, the reality of what we'd just been through began to sink in. We debated about whether to go to the police, but fear won out. What if those men had connections? What if they came after us or our families? In the end, we made a pact to never speak of what happened. That day changed us all. We'd gone looking for a thrill and found terror instead. The nightmares lasted for weeks, months for some of us. Every unexpected noise made us jump. Every stranger on the street a potential threat. But it also brought us closer together. We'd faced death and come out the other side. That kind of experience bonds you in ways nothing else can. We never went urban exploring again after that. The thrill wasn't worth the risk. But sometimes when I pass an abandoned building, I can't help but wonder what secrets it might be hiding. And I shudder, remembering the day our curiosity almost got us killed. The Millbrook factory still stands, as far as I know, a decaying monument to a dying industry, and a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in forgotten places. If you ever find yourself tempted to explore such a place, remember our story. Sometimes the real monsters aren't the ghosts of the past, but the very real dangers of the present. The flickering fluorescent light above me buzzed like an angry insect, casting an eerie glow over the empty corridors. It was just another quiet night at Oak Ridge office complex, or so I thought. Little did I know that in a matter of hours, I'd be fighting for my life, trapped in a place I once considered mundane and safe. My name's Carlos, and I've been the night janitor at Oak Ridge for the past 5 years. It's not a glamorous job, but it pays the bills and lets me work on my novels during the quiet hours. I know every nook and cranny of this place, from the CEO's corner office on the top floor to the musty supply closets in the basement. But on that fateful night, even my intimate knowledge of the building wouldn't be enough to keep me safe. It started like any other shift. I arrived at 10 p.m., just as the last of the workaholics were trudging out to their cars. I nodded to Marjorie from accounting as she passed, her arms full of files. She was probably taking home to work on. She gave me a tired smile in return. "Another late night, Carlos?" I asked, holding the door open for her. "You know how it is during tax season, Carlos." She sighed. "See you tomorrow." If only I'd known those might be the last words we'd ever exchange. I started my rounds on the top floor, working my way down. Vacuumed the carpets, emptied the trash, wiped down the surfaces. It was mindless work, leaving my imagination free to wander. I was deep in thought about the plot of my latest story when I heard it. A crash, followed by muffled cursing. I froze, my hand still on the handle of the vacuum. The sound had come from downstairs, maybe the 3rd or 4th floor. My first thought was that Marjorie had come back for something she'd forgotten. But Marjorie didn't curse like that. Cautiously, I made my way to the stairwell. The emergency lights cast long shadows as I descended, my heart pounding louder with each step. As I reached the 4th floor landing, I heard voices, low, urgent whispers, that definitely didn't belong to anyone who should be in the building at this hour. I eased the door open just a crack, peering into the darkened office space. What I saw made my blood run cold. 3 men, dressed all in black, were methodically going through the desks and filing cabinets. They moved with purpose, clearly looking for something specific. One of them held a small flashlight, its beam dancing across the room as they searched. Intruders, thieves, and here I was, alone in the building with them. I let the door close silently, my mind racing. I needed to call the police, but my cell phone was in my locker in the basement. The landlines on this floor would be useless. The phone system automatically shut down after hours to prevent long-distance abuse. I had to get to the security office on the ground floor. It had a separate phone line and direct access to the police. As quietly as I could, I started down the stairs. I had just reached the 3rd floor landing when I heard the stairwell door above me open. They were coming down. Panic surged through me. I yanked open the 3rd floor door and ducked inside, praying they hadn't seen me. I could hear their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. As they descended, "Check this floor," I heard one of them say. "We need to find those files." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear it. I looked around frantically for a place to hide. The open office layout left few options. But then I saw it, the supply closet. I darted across the room, wincing at every footfall that seemed to echo in the silence. I had just closed the supply closet behind me when I heard them enter the floor. Pressed against the back wall of the closet, surrounded by the smell of cleaning products and paper, I tried to steady my breathing. Through the slats in the door, I could see flashlight beams sweeping across the office. "Nothing here," one of them growled. After what felt like an eternity, "Let's try the next floor." I waited until I couldn't hear their footsteps anymore, before allowing myself to breathe normally. But I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to get to that security office. Easing the supply closet door open, I peered out into the darkness. The floor seemed empty. I crept towards the stairwell, every nerve on high alert. I had just reached the stairwell when I heard a shout from above. "Hey there! There's someone down there!" They'd seen me. I ran, taking the stairs 2 at a time,
I flew down towards the ground floor. I could hear them behind me, their heavy footsteps echoing off the concrete walls. I burst out of the stairwell and into the main lobby. The security office was just across the atrium. I was halfway there when a figure stepped out in front of me. I skidded to a stop, nearly falling in my haste to change direction. The man lunged for me, but years of maneuvering around office furniture with my cleaning cart had made me nimble. I ducked under his grasp and sprinted for the elevators. I jabbed the call button repeatedly, knowing it was useless. The elevators were shut bound for the night, but next to the elevators was a door marked maintenance. Beyond that, a ladder that led to the roof. I yanked the door open and started climbing, my arms burning with the effort. Above me, I could hear the maintenance door slam open again. They were following me up. I reached the roof access hatch and pushed it open, gulping in the cool night air.
Up onto the gravel-covered roof. Stars twinkled overhead, oblivious to the drama unfolding below them. I ran to the edge of the roof, looking for a way down. There was none. I was trapped. The hatch banged open behind me. I turned to see the three men climbing onto the roof, their faces twisted with anger and exertion. "Nowhere to run now," one of them sneered, advancing towards me. I backed up until I felt the low wall of the edge of the roof against my legs. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know who you are or what you want, but I won't say anything. Just let me go." The man in the lead, a tall, broad-shouldered figure with a scar running down his cheek, laughed. "Sorry, pal. Can't take that risk." He lunged at me. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw his hand reaching for me, saw the malice in his eyes, and I made a decision. I vaulted over the low wall. For a heart-stopping moment, I was in free fall. Then my feet hit something solid. The window washing platform left in place by the crew earlier that day. I heard shouts of surprise from above as I frantically worked the controls. The platform lurched into motion, slowly descending the side of the building. But I wasn't safe yet. I could see one of the men leaning over the edge of the roof, taking aim with what looked like a gun. I pressed myself against the side of the building as the first shot pinged off the metal platform. The second shot shattered one of the support cables. The platform tipped dangerously, and I had to grab onto the railing to keep from falling. I was still 4 stories up, too high to jump. That's when I saw it. A window left open on the 3rd floor. It was a long shot, but it was my only chance. As the platform swung wildly, I timed my move. 1 second, 2, 3. I leapt. For a moment, I thought I'd miscalculated. Then my hands caught the windowsill. Pain shot through my arms as I hauled myself inside, collapsing onto the floor of an empty office. I didn't allow myself a moment to rest. I could hear commotion in the stairwell. They were coming down after me. I ran for the elevators. They were still powered down, but there was an emergency phone inside. I wrenched open the doors and grabbed the phone. 911, what's your emergency? I've never been so glad to hear those words in my life. The next few minutes were a blur. I stayed on the phone with the dispatcher, hidden in the elevator, until I heard the beautiful sound of police sirens approaching. The would-be thieves were caught trying to flee the building. It turned out they were after confidential client information that could have ruined lives if it had fallen into the wrong hands. As I sat in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket around my shoulders, I watched the men being led away in handcuffs. One of them, the scarred leader, caught my eye as he was put into a police car. The look he gave me sent chills down my spine. I gave my statement to the police, then went home to my worried wife and sleeping kids. As I hugged them tight, I realized how close I'd come to never seeing them again. I don't work nights anymore. The company offered me a day position with better pay, partially out of gratitude, partially out of guilt, for the lack of security that had put me in danger. Sometimes when I'm leaving the office in the evening and I see the night janitor starting his shift, I feel a pang of something. Fear, sympathy, I'm not sure. I want to warn him, to tell him to be careful, to always be on alert. But I don't. I just nod and smile and hope that his nights will be quieter than mine were. And as I drive home, I'm grateful for the mundane, for the ordinary.
because I know now how quickly it can all change, how thin the line is between routine and terror. And I never, ever take an uneventful night for granted again. The soft glow of the TV flickered in the darkened living room, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Little Timmy had been asleep for hours, and I was settling in for a quiet night of babysitting. But as I absent-mindedly scrolled through my phone, a message popped up that made my blood run cold. In that moment, I realized this ordinary suburban home had become the stage for a terrifying game of cat and mouse. My name's Amy, and I've been babysitting for the Johnsons for about 6 months now. They're good people with a sweet kid, and the gig helps pay for my college textbooks. It was supposed to be just another Friday night job, but it turned into the most horrifying experience of my life. The evening had started normally enough. I arrived at 7 p.m. just as Mr. and Mrs. Johnson were heading out for their date night. Timmy, their 8-year-old son, was already in his pajamas, eager to show me his latest Lego creation. Now, Amy, Mrs. Johnson said, as she put on her earrings, Timmy's allowed 1 hour of tablet time before bed. The parental controls are on, so he should only be able to access his games and approved websites. I nodded, having heard this spiel before. No worries, Mrs. Johnson, we'll be fine. If only I'd known how wrong I was. After the Johnsons left, Timmy and I had dinner. He chatted excitedly about school and his friends, and I listened with half an ear, smiling and nodding at the right moments. Around 8 p.m., I handed him his tablet for his allotted screen time. Remember, buddy, just 1 hour, I said, then it's bedtime. Timmy nodded, already engrossed in whatever game he was playing. I settled onto the couch with my own phone, scrolling through social media and texting friends. At 9 p.m., I told Timmy it was time for bed. He grumbled a bit, but handed over the tablet without too much fuss. As I tucked him in, he seemed a little quieter than usual. Everything okay, Timmy? I asked. He hesitated for a moment, then said, Amy, is it okay to have secret friends? Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. What do you mean by secret friends, Timmy? He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. Just someone I talk to sometimes, but it's a secret. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. Timmy, who is this secret friend? How do you talk to them? But Timmy had clammed up. He rolled over, pulling the covers up to his chin. Never mind. Good night, Amy. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do. Should I press him for more information, call his parents? In the end, I decided to check the tablet first. Maybe I was overreacting. Back in the living room, I unlocked the tablet. At first glance, everything seemed normal, just the usual games and child-friendly apps. But then, I noticed an app I didn't recognize. It looked like a harmless puzzle game with a colorful icon of interlocking blocks. When I opened it, my heart dropped. It wasn't a game at all, but a messaging app, and there in the chat history was a conversation that made my skin crawl. The messages were from someone calling themselves Game Master Mike. At first, they seemed innocent enough, talking about games in school, but as I scrolled, the tone changed. Remember, Timmy, this is our secret. Don't tell your parents or your babysitter. I can't wait to meet you in person. It'll be so much fun. I'll be coming to see you very soon, maybe even tonight. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the tablet. This wasn't just some online predator grooming a child from afar. This Mike was planning to come here tonight. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the police, when a message popped up on the screen. It was from an unknown number. Hello, Amy. Timmy's asleep now, isn't he? Why don't you let me in so we can surprise him? Terror washed over me in an icy wave. He was here, outside the house, watching. I ran to the windows, making sure they were all locked. I could see nothing but darkness outside, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. I quickly drew all the curtains. My mind was racing. I needed to call the police, but what if he heard me? What if he decided to break in before help could arrive? Another message pinged on my phone. Come on, Amy, don't be rude. I've come all this way. I muted my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I had to protect Timmy. I had to think.
Closed the closet door, then the bedroom door, hoping it would be enough to keep him safe. Back downstairs, I grabbed the largest knife from the kitchen. It felt awkward and heavy in my hand, but it was better than nothing. Another message on my phone. "I'm getting impatient, Amy. Maybe I'll just let myself in." I heard a noise from the back of the house, the sound of the patio door sliding open. He was inside. I pressed myself against the wall next to the kitchen doorway, knife raised, barely daring to breathe. I could hear footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving through the house. "Timmy," a man's voice called softly. "It's me, Game Master Mike. I've come to play." The footsteps were getting closer. I could see a shadow approaching the kitchen doorway. In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I saw a hand appear around the doorframe, then an arm, then a shoulder. Without thinking, I swung the knife. There was a yell of pain and surprise. The man stumbled back, clutching his arm where I had slashed him. He was tall, heavy-set, with a scraggly beard and wild eyes, nothing like the friendly persona he'd created online. "You little bitch," he snarled, lunging at me. I dodged, but he was faster than I expected. He grabbed my wrist, squeezing until I dropped the knife. It clattered to the floor. We grappled, his strength overwhelming me. He slammed me against the wall, knocking the wind out of me. His hand found my throat, squeezing. "Where is he?" he growled. "Where's Timmy?" I clawed at his hand, gasping for air. Black spots were dancing at the edges of my vision. This was it, I thought. I was going to die. Then, through the roaring in my ears, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Police sirens. The man's grip loosened in surprise, and I took my chance. I brought my knee up hard, catching him in the groin. He doubled over with a grunt of pain, and I shoved past him. I ran for the front door, yanking it open just as a police car screeched to a halt in the driveway. "Help!" I screamed. "He's inside!" The next few minutes were a blur. Police officers swarmed the house. The man, whose real name I later learned was Gerald Hoffman, was tackled trying to escape through the back door. Timmy was found safe in the closet, scared but unharmed. As I sat in the back of an ambulance answering a detective's questions, I watched them lead Hoffman away in handcuffs. He caught my eye as they put him in the police car, and the look he gave me was pure hatred. I shuddered, knowing that if the police hadn't arrived when they did, things could have ended very differently. It turned out that one of the neighbors had seen a strange man lurking around the house and called the police. I've never been so grateful for nosy neighbors in my life. The Johnsons arrived home to a scene of chaos. Police cars, an ambulance, their house a crime scene. They were horrified by what had almost happened and incredibly grateful that I had protected Timmy. In the days that followed, as the story hit the local news, I was hailed as a hero. But I didn't feel like one. I felt scared, violated, and angry. Angry at Hoffman for preying on an innocent child. Angry at myself for not realizing sooner what was happening. Angry at the world for being a place where such monsters exist. I don't babysit anymore. The trauma of that night left scars that are still healing. But I did start volunteering for an organization that teaches kids about online safety. If I can prevent even one child from going through what Timmy almost did, maybe some good can come from that terrifying night. Every time I pass the Johnsons' house, I remember. I remember the fear, the adrenaline, the moment I thought it was all over. But I also remember that I survived, that I protected Timmy, and I know that no matter how dark the world can be, there's always hope as long as there are people willing to stand up to the darkness. The acrid smell of chemicals burned my nostrils as I crouched behind a fallen tree, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give away my position. What had started as a peaceful hiking trip had turned into a desperate fight for survival. I never imagined that stumbling upon a hidden meth lab deep in the woods would put me and my friends in mortal danger. But here we were, being hunted like animals in a forest that had suddenly become our prison. My name's Alex, and I've always loved the outdoors, so when my friends Jake and Sarah suggested a weekend hiking trip in the Ozarks, I jumped on the chance. We were all experienced hikers, confident in our ability to handle whatever nature threw our way. But nature, as it turned out, wasn't the threat we needed to worry about. We set out early Friday morning, the air crisp and filled with the promise of adventure. The trail we'd chosen was off the beaten path, recommended by a local guide as a challenging but rewarding trek. For the first day and a half, it was exactly that. We navigated steep inclines, crossed babbling streams, and marveled at the lush canopy above us. It was late Saturday afternoon when things took a turn. We had veered slightly off the marked trail, following what looked like a game path in search of a good spot to set up camp for the night. "Guys, do you smell that?" Sarah asked, wrinkling her nose. I sniffed the air. There was definitely an odd odor, sharp and chemical. It reminded me of the time I'd accidentally left a can of paint thinner open in my garage. "Maybe there's a factory nearby," Jake suggested, but he sounded uncertain. We should have turned back then, but curiosity got the better of us. We pressed on, following the strengthening scent. As we pushed through a dense thicket, the trees suddenly opened up into a small clearing. What we saw made us freeze in our tracks. In the middle of the clearing stood a dilapidated cabin, but it wasn't the building that caught our attention. It was the collection of equipment scattered around it: plastic containers, tubing, propane tanks, and other paraphernalia that I'd only ever seen on crime shows. "Holy shit," Jake whispered. "Is that what I think it is?" Before either Sarah or I could respond, we heard voices, rough, angry voices coming from inside the cabin. "Get down," I hissed, dropping to the ground behind a fallen log. Jake and Sarah followed suit, our bodies pressed into the damp earth. Through a gap in the log, I could see two men emerge from the cabin. They were arguing about something. Supplies, I think. They looked nothing like the stereotypical meth cooks I'd seen on TV. These guys were burly with hard eyes and clothes that had seen better days, and they were armed. "We need to get out of here," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly, starting to back away. But as I moved, my backpack caught on a branch. The resulting snap seemed to echo through the clearing. The men's heads whipped in our direction. "What was that?" one of them growled. "Probably just an animal," the other replied, but he didn't sound convinced. We lay there, barely breathing, praying they wouldn't investigate further. For a moment it seemed like luck was on our side. The men turned back to their conversation. Then Jake sneezed. It wasn't loud, but in the tense silence, it might as well have been a gunshot. "There's someone out there," one of the men shouted. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. We scrambled to our feet and ran, crashing through the underbrush with no regard for stealth. Behind us, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. "Split up," I yelled to Jake and Sarah. "Meet back at the car if you can." It was a risky move, but I hoped it would confuse our pursuers. I veered left, while Jake and Sarah went right. I ran like I'd never run before, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but fear kept me going. I had no idea where I was going, no plan beyond get away. As I ran, the forest seemed to close in around me. The trees were denser here, the undergrowth thicker. It was getting darker too, the sun setting behind the mountains. I don't know how long I ran. It could have been minutes or hours. Every sound made me flinch. Was it
My pursuer, or just the natural noises of the forest? Finally, when I felt I couldn't take another step, I saw it. A small cave, half hidden by a curtain of vines. Without hesitation, I dove inside. The cave was shallow, more of an overhang, really. But it was enough. I pressed myself against the back wall, trying to quiet my ragged breathing. Outside, I could hear movement, heavy footsteps, branches snapping. He was close. "I know you're around here somewhere," the man called out. His voice was closer than I expected, and I had to stifle a gasp. I closed my eyes, willing myself to become invisible. The footsteps drew nearer, then paused right outside my hiding spot. For a moment that felt like an eternity, there was silence. I didn't dare breathe. Then, mercifully, the footsteps started to move away. I waited until I could no longer hear any sound before allowing myself to relax slightly. But I knew I couldn't stay here. I had to find Jake and Sarah, had to get help. As quietly as I could, I eased myself out of the cave. The forest was dark now, the trees casting long shadows in the fading light. I had no idea which direction to go, but I knew I couldn't go back the way I'd come. I picked a direction and started walking, trying to favor my injured ankle. Every snapping twig made me jump. Every rustling leaf had me looking over my shoulder. After what felt like hours of aimless wandering, I heard something that made my heart leap, the sound of running water. A stream, and if I could find the stream, I might be able to find my way back to the trail. I followed the sound, hope giving me renewed energy as I pushed through a dense patch of undergrowth. I suddenly found myself face to face with Sarah. We both stifled screams of surprise, then hugged each other fiercely. "Oh my God, Alex," Sarah whispered. I didn't know if—" "I'm okay," I assured her, though okay was a relative term at this point. "Have you seen Jake?" She shook her head, tears in her eyes. "We got separated. I've been hiding, trying to figure out what to do." Together, we decided to follow the stream. It had to lead somewhere, and it was our best chance of finding our way out of this nightmare. We walked through the night, jumping at every sound, expecting to see one of our pursuers behind every tree. As dawn broke, we finally heard something that filled us with relief and dread in equal measure. The distant sound of vehicles. Cautiously, we approached the sound. Through the trees, we could see a road, and on that road, a welcome sight: police cars. It turned out that Jake had managed to find his way back to our car and had immediately driven to the nearest town to get help. The police had been searching for us all night. As we were escorted to safety, I looked back at the forest. Somewhere in there were dangerous men and their illegal operation, but they'd be found soon enough. Our ordeal had ensured that. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and medical checks. The meth lab was raided, the men arrested. We were hailed as heroes by the local media, though it certainly didn't feel heroic at the time. It took a long time for the nightmares to stop, for me to be able to hear a twig snap without flinching. But eventually I found my way back to the trails. The forest, once a place of peace and adventure, had shown me its darker side, but it had also shown me my own strength, my will to survive. Now, when I hike, I carry with me the knowledge that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, but I also carry the certainty that I can face that danger and overcome it. The forest may hide secrets, some of them deadly, but it can't hide the human spirit's capacity for survival. The golden light of sunset painted the forest in warm hues, but a chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. As I peered through my camera's viewfinder, I caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't be there, a pair of gleaming eyes watching me from the shadows. In that moment, I realized I had become the prey, and the hunter was unlike anything I had ever encountered before. My name is Jack, and I'm a wildlife photographer. I've spent years tracking and photographing some of the most elusive creatures on the planet, from the snow leopards of the Himalayas to the jaguars of the Amazon. I thought I'd seen it all, but nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to face in the remote wilderness of the Pacific Northwest. I'd come to this particular stretch of old-growth forest following rumors of an undocumented species.
Local tribes spoke of a creature that walked on two legs, but was covered in fur, with eyes that glowed in the dark. Most dismissed as folklore, but I've learned over the years that legends often have a kernel of truth. For days, I had been setting up camera traps and staking out promising locations. I had seen nothing but the usual wildlife: deer, elk, the occasional black bear. But as the sun began to set on my 5th day in the forest, everything changed. I was perched in a tree blind, my camera ready, watching a small clearing where I had noticed unusual tracks earlier. The light was fading fast, and I was considering packing up for the night, when I heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. My heart rate spiked, but years of experience kept me still. I raised my camera, scanning the tree line through my telephoto lens. That's when I saw them. 2 eyes, reflecting the last rays of the sunlight, set in a face that was almost, but not quite, human. I snapped a series of shots instinctively, the camera shutter sounding unnaturally loud in the hushed forest. As soon as I lowered my camera, the eyes were gone, but I could still feel its presence, watching, waiting. With trembling hands, I checked the photos I'd just taken. Most were blurry, useless, but one, the last one, was crystal clear. What I saw made my blood run cold. The face was ape-like, but with an intelligence in its eyes that was undeniably sentient. This was no known animal. This was something else entirely. As darkness fell, I knew I had to get out of there. Whatever this creature was, it was clearly aware of me, and I didn't want to find out if it was as curious about me as it was about me. I began to pack up my gear, as quietly as I could, all too aware of the rustling sounds coming from the underbrush around me. Just as I was about to descend from my perch, a blood-curdling screech pierced the night. It was close, too close. I froze, one hand on the tree trunk, the other clutching my camera bag. The forest had gone deadly quiet, as if every living thing was holding its breath. Then I heard it. The sound of something large moving through the forest, heading straight for my tree. Panic surged through me. I dealt with charging elephants and stalking tigers, but always from a safe distance or with guides nearby. Here I was alone, and whatever was coming was unlike anything in my experience. I scrambled down the tree, no longer caring about stealth. As soon as my feet hit the ground, I ran. I had no plan, no direction in mind. Pure instinct drove me forward, crashing through undergrowth, leaping over fallen logs. Behind me, I could hear it pursuing. The creature moved with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional snap of a branch or rustle of leaves. It was toying with me, I realized with growing horror. It could have caught me at any time, but it was drawing out the chase. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead, but terror kept me moving. In the darkness, I could barely see where I was going. Branches whipped at my face, roots threatened to trip me with every step, but I didn't dare slow down. Suddenly, the ground disappeared from beneath my feet. I plunged forward, tumbling down a steep embankment. Pain shot through my body as I rolled, unable to stop my descent. When I finally came to a stop, I lay there for a moment, dazed and winded. The sound of rushing water filled my ears. I had landed near a river. As I struggled to my feet, wincing at the pain in my ankle, an idea struck me. The creature, whatever it was, seemed to rely heavily on scent. If I could cross the river, I might be able to throw it off my trail. I limped towards the sound of water. My eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness. The river loomed before me, a black ribbon cutting through the forest. It was wide and fast-moving, far more dangerous than I had hoped. But I could hear movement in the forest behind me. I was out of options. Taking a deep breath, I waded in the icy water, took my breath away, but I pushed forward. The current tugged at my legs, threatening to sweep me away. By the time I reached the middle, the water was up to my chest. My camera bag felt like it weighed a ton, dragging me down.